Woo! Hey, hey, hey. Goodness to you. It's Sporty King. And you know, I always say goodness because I don't know whether you're watching morning, afternoon, or evening. But then I like to add to that, isn't it great to have good in front of your salutation? Look, I'm on 2 minutes early, so we've still got less than about a minute and a half before today's message. So you still got time to go get your last drink, last go to the bathroom, whatever, close out your last message. But I still keep those presentation tips through the new year. And that is when you're going live, come on early and give people a chance to settle in, give technology a chance to do what they call build the audience. And I've got this is my new broadcast season for you anyway. So this is my, even though my Glue Wednesday, because this is replacing Glue Wednesday. Normally, Glue Wednesday is my more interactive day. I'm going to see how I do that with Truth Thursday. But the thing is, I had so much time to plan it that I may have overplanned it. So we'll see. Okay, we'll see. And in terms of the time frame, but I don't mind saying things like that because all of these things that you have to consider when you decide you're going to do live, when you decide you're going to go into business, you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to give a presentation. There are a lot of things that go into that thought. You have less than a minute today for our broadcast to begin. So, anytime you see somebody and you say, oh man, they're a natural, they make it look so easy. That comes from practice and discipline. So, you have to have those things going for you. So speaking of going for you, let's get going for you today because it is now 1:00 here on the East Coast. And therefore, I want to also say, let's continue to have our prayers, not only to the people on the West Coast and with the fires in California, but also in New Orleans as they continue in the aftermath of the mass killing. So, there's a lot of things that we could be praying for. And so let's just continue to do that. But that's also a part of what today's session is about. Okay. So welcome to Truth Thursday. Now, bam, Truth Thursday. Okay. As I've had to close out, as I mentioned, I had to close out Glue Wednesday because I've decided to shift and I started my new year continuing my commitment to better health. And I started a water aerobics class that actually meets on Wednesday afternoons. So rather than, rush my water aerobics class and my health to get the Glue Wednesday in, I decided to switch it over to Thursday. Okay. And then I decided to move to this new creation and recognize that I call it Truth Thursday. And we're going to look at TRUTH and recognize that tests are rarely understood until testimonies heal. That's what truth is. Tests are rarely understood until testimonies heal. And honestly, already I realized I forgot to add my that's in my book, Affirmations. That's one of my affirmations where I make the word come to life. So just a lot of stuff can go into one thing. But we want to start by looking at why I created this this title in this session. First, I decided to go with the fact that, actually, I got to tell you this. I thought about calling it Glue Wednesday on Thursday. And then I said, well, maybe I'll call it Trust Thursday. And then I said, well, maybe I'll call it Truth Thursday. And I decided to go with Truth Thursday. So I want to let you know a little bit about that creative process. You see, truth actually needs half the letters from the word Thursday. TH, U, and R are the only letters in the word truth. So that's why I decided to go with Truth Thursday, because it needs half the letters from the word Thursday. Second, we've all heard the saying that the truth shall set you free. Well, I think that what we need to recognize, as we easily say that cliche, hey, the truth shall set you free. But you know what? Freedom is a tough choice. Freedom is a tough choice because freedom is actually a result. Freedom is a result of what happened. So, so the truth shall set you free, but freedom is a result. So getting into what truth stands for, let's start out by embracing that first word, which is test. Text. Okay. because that's the root of testimony. You can't have the freedom, the forecast, and the fullness of a testimony without the test. Thus, my guiding scripture today will be Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And that will connect us to today's message, what I call Plan C. And the message is kind of about why I don't believe in and do New Year's resolutions. One of my biggest reasons is because I can be pretty literal about language sometimes, as you know. And every year I hear people say, oh man, this is going to be my year. I can feel it. And that's why, jokingly, I posted a meme last week that said, this is going to be my day. I can feel it. And then my added commentary to that was, I'm on my 70th new year. And many of them had days that I questioned, what's going on with this day, right? But God answered each time with, yeah. And sometimes I heard him, and I've learned to trust his track record as he turns it into mine. You see, I believe that God celebrates our days of getting his plan with a healthy cheer, hearty cheer of yeah, like we do at the game. Yeah, okay? Still, I haven't always heard for 2, 3, 4, 10 days in a row. Sometimes you don't hear God celebrating you. Yet, I add my yeah when I look back and see what I didn't hear. See, so God's track record of my growth becomes mine as he tries to transfer it to me as I start to see and hear him say, yeah, there you go. Now you got what I'm trying to get you. But that's why test is the root of testimony, because we have to go through the test. And sometimes when we're going through the test, we don't hear or we don't see God in this test. So let me know where you're looking in from, by the way. Thank you for the love. And I still like to give my shout outs. Okay. So today, what I've chosen to do is share one of my tests that I experienced last year, sprinkled with some things around it that makes it not 2020, this is my year. 2020, I didn't, remember at January 1st last year, you said this is going to be my year. Well, here, January 2025, I say that 2024 was one of my years. It wasn't my year. It was one of my years. And that's me being literal, okay, with my explanation. So I say, hey, what's going on, Tasha? Coming in from yeah, good to see you. Welcome, front row lady. Good to see you, and I hope everything is going well with you, okay? So anyway, that's why I say 22, I want to show you one testimony. I'm going to use one testimony that went throughout my year and sprinkle some stuff around it so that you can understand where I might be coming from. Okay. And I'll start with September. Now in September, I got towed from Greenville after driving from Charlotte to Charleston to Greenville. Now I had driven to Charleston first to visit cousins whose wife and mother was suffering from cancer. My cousin and his daughter, the wife and the mother of my cousins, was suffering from cancer. So I drove down to Charleston. That was a 3-hour drive. And then I drove, after visiting them for about an hour, I drove 2.5 hours to Greenville, South Carolina for a speaking engagement. When the engagement was over, I began the drive back to Charlotte, only to have my engine start smoking about 15 to 20 minutes into the drive. Well, where I was, I said, okay, I need to pull over. But that first exit that I saw, it looked like Jason from Friday the 13th was going to be there. It looked like Never Neverland. I said, no, I can't pull over at this entrance, this exit where I'm going to be stranded. Let me make it to the next exit, which I didn't know that the next exit had a gas station and everything, because I used to stop there for gas. And sure enough, I made it to that next exit with the car smoking. And then I ended up sitting there waiting for a tow. I called my insurance company, and see, because by now it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm sure that, and on a Saturday, so I'm sure a lot of tow companies didn't want to have to tow somebody from Greenville, South Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina, because that was just over an hour, about 58 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes of a tow. So you can imagine they probably wouldn't be able to get a return tow. They can't. Probably thought about how many they would miss in between. You gotta filter all of that stuff in, right? Well, anyway, what I did was where am I? Okay, so meanwhile, I waited. I called the guy who I knew in Charlotte, who had a tow company, and he drove down to Greenville and picked me up and towed me back to Charlotte. He dropped me at Meineke at my mechanic and then drove me home. Then the next 2 days later, so I called Meineke, let them know that was why my car was there, and they checked it out for me. And then a couple of days later, they told me that, look, Sporty, this car is starting to nickel and dime you. It's time to let it go. And here I want to stop and laugh with a shout out to my friend Trudy Shea, who responded to a meme that I posted last week. Because see, I said my mechanic told me to let the car go. And so last week I posted a meme that said, settle things in one of two ways: surrender or accomplish. Most of the time, aim for that second option. And here's why I smile and high five Trudy as I share her comment, because what she said was, maybe sometimes surrender is the accomplishment. Sometimes surrender is the accomplishment. I was like, wow, thanks, Trudy. So that's why I say high five for that. Some tests lead to testimonies based on having stepped back and surrendered. So I thank God that my meme did say most of the time, aim for the second one. And again, I can go back and hear him saying, yeah. Meanwhile, I have to also go all the way back to January 2024 to fully show and let you see what September and 2024 meant to me. So I'm going to go fast, but let's go back to January. First of all, my car overheated on the way to Atlanta. My brother Mike had come down from New York, and we drove to Atlanta for New Year's. The car overheated some hours before we made it to Atlanta. We stopped, bought some coolant, refilled the radiator, and as I said, we made it to Atlanta. While in Atlanta, I drove around, we hung out, and then we drove back to Charlotte. In February, I found out I had a speaking engagement in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So I called my Pennsylvania sister, Nina, and scheduled my trip for my speaking engagement so that I could include spending some time with her. So the engagement was on Saturday. I flew in on Tuesday and hung out with her through Sunday. The day after I got back home, I was in a near accident when a car cut in front of me on the street. I was able to yank the wheel and hit up onto the sidewalk, which ended up giving me a flat on my right passenger side. As I got out to inspect the damage, I slammed my thumb in the door because I was just one aisle, I still had half the car in traffic. So I was holding the door so I could close it slowly, and I slammed my thumb in the car. So now I couldn't hold the jack or change the tire. So I rumbled on to a 7-Eleven parking lot, and I called and met Shannon, who was an entrepreneur who owns Outlaw Towing. And yep, he'll be the one who drove down and towed me from Greenville to Charlotte in September. See how it's already coming together? Okay. Then in March, as I was driving to Raleigh to connect with my niece, Sierra, about 15 minutes into my drive, I heard a rumble under my car. I pulled over. Well, but before I pulled over, it seemed to get louder whenever I sped up. So I pull over, got out, and looked under and saw that the black under thing, I don't do cars, so it was an under thing, had detached from the car. So I turned back. I called Sierra and I canceled, and I turned back, and then I drove it slowly so I didn't hear that wind, because as I was thinking about it, since this black thing had dropped from underneath my car, as the wind was blowing that, I was worried that if I went fast, it would blow and pull it off, and then that car might flip over. I didn't know, but that was what came to my mind, okay? But I decided to drive it slowly, and then I took it to Meineke, my mechanic, a couple of days later, because they didn't have a space for me right away. And they told me, hey, you don't need this black thing under the car. It's protecting the underneath, blah, blah, blah. And so they just took it off for me. That's March. In May, one of my great nieces, Manu, graduated from college, but her graduation conflicted with my engagement in South Carolina. So I watched it and I recorded it on YouTube. But later that month, I had another engagement in South Carolina. And on the drive down, my battery died. I ended up getting it recharged at an AutoZone, and then buying a charger to make the rest of the trip for the weekend. I recharged the car overnight on Saturday night, and then on Sunday, I made it back to Charlotte the following evening. Yet, during that engagement, during that engagement, I included the video that I recorded of Manu's graduation, of her crossing the stage. I included that in my presentation. And I welcome the audience to join in with applause for her for graduating from college. I recorded that with my phone, and then I sent her the video of her being celebrated by the South Carolina Army National Guard. Now, what uncle gets to say that they did that? Right. Okay, so let's keep moving on. In August, I took the car in because it continued to overheat. Well, it turned out that it was a cracked transmission. Yet, the repair was free because it was under warranty. Are you seeing how I'm adding now the testimonies in those tests? Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Right. Are you seeing how I'm starting to add the testimonies in these tests? The tests do not become fully understood until we recognize that the testimony is where the healing comes from. Okay, so back to September. After surrendering, I began my search for a new car and had my budget number in my head. At the dealership that I went to, as he kept trying to get me to increase my budget, I sat there and realized, you know what? I really don't need a car. I'm just used to having one. I visualized my calendar and my upcoming schedule, and the only time I needed to drive would be in a month in October when I'll be going back to South Carolina. However, the challenge would be that because I still owed $3,500 on my old car, I could not easily trade it in because I actually didn't own it. So while I was in that dealership, I had decided to get a new car and then pay off the old one by doing a part-time driving Uber. And then I left the dealership. Yet, as I continued to pursue my options, it turned out to be Customer Appreciation Week on Charlotte's public transportation system. So I rode the bus and the train for free as I went about my not needing a car while preparing for plan A, which is to drive the Uber part-time for 6 months to pay off my car. So that's what I figured that, for 6 months, because driving Uber, I figured I could make $600 a month. And in 6 months, boom, that $3,500, I could pay it off. That was my original plan. Well, let me tell you, that's plan A. A lot happened in October. Okay. So I bought that new car and it turned out to have a bad transmission. Fortunately, I had done something that I had never done before. I bought the limited warranty and it ended up covering the transmission, the $6,000 transmission job because I heard this noise. I bought the car on Thursday and we had rain storms that Thursday and Friday. So I didn't really drive it on Friday, but on Saturday as I was driving, I heard this noise. And wait, it just dawned on me. I got to give you a funny part of something that I did. Okay. Remember I told you how the car kept overheating? So what I did was when I needed to go to this dealership to trade the car in, and this was the day when somebody had gotten it to the budget level that I wanted. I called Shannon again with Outlaw Towing. I had him tow me to the other side of town, 3 blocks away from the dealership. And then I could drive to the dealership so that I didn't drive up onto the lot with my engine smoking. As well as, I didn't know if I'd be able to even drive over there where my engine would start smoking and I wouldn't be able to make it. So that's what I did. I had him tow me over, drop me off 3 blocks away, and then I drove into the dealership to make the deal. Well, as it turned, and thanks, Tasha. As it turns out, I had been dealing with like 4 different car dealerships with, trying to get a car and getting my budget and getting the trade in. And as it turns out, this was the only dealership. This is also why it was hard to get my a car note down to my budget level, because they had to buy my old car and then give me a new plan. Well, this happened to be the only ones who didn't offer to buy my car and get a new plan. And I forgot that. I didn't realize it until it was time to sign the contract. And because I'm now getting my budget where I'm getting my payment where I wanted it. And so that's when I found out oops, this is the one that's not going to do the trade-in. So now I own 2 cars. But meanwhile, I had gotten my budget down, my $200 that I wanted was $211 a month. My old car is $190 a month. Okay. So now I'm about to have 2 car payments a month. But I'm okay with that, except that now I say, okay, well, I'm going to have to figure out what I'm going to do. So let me get back to my notes. Okay. Okay. So that car ended up having a bad transmission, the new one. And I went to my mechanic and they double checked but they don't do that type of work. I had to take it to the Nissan dealership. And so that's where they contacted the warranty company and they said, yes, they cover it. All right. Boom. Testimony. Meanwhile, still in October, I found out that my December engagement, the first weekend in December, which was going to be part of paying off the old car, was canceled. Then after that engagement in South Carolina, remember I told you I was going to need the car in October, and I thought I was going to end up renting a car to go there, but I ended up buying this car. So I drove down and I had lunch with Johnny. And we had rain checked that lunch for almost 2 years, and we finally had that lunch. And then during that lunch, he told me about how Ginger said that she needed to contact me about helping her with a presentation. I followed up and ended up with her as a coaching client. And so I coached Ginger through her presentation. Meanwhile, somewhere in there, I decided not to drive Uber because it was too intensive to get authorized for part-time. So as you can see, the testimony starting to sprinkle in. Johnny and I had been rain checking that lunch for 2 years. And while we were doing it, we ended up talking, and we talked about another soldier, Ginger, and she had just mentioned to Johnny, yeah, I need to call Sporty, but she hadn't done it. So I called her. Boom. I had myself a coaching contract, and therefore I was starting to get my money back together, right? But for Uber, and I'm not knocking Uber, by the way, I'm giving them credit. Their authorization process, their reference checking and stuff, it's complicated. I wouldn't be able to do that for part-time. It was too much work for me. Okay. You had to get the insurance. You had to get your car cleaned. You had to get the reverse camera. It's a lot of stuff. I said, you know what? I'm not going through all of that to just be able to do something. Okay. And thank you, Tasha. Bam. Look at God. See, okay. You're getting into where I'm going with this whole message. Okay. Look at God. So, yeah, I decided, plan A was not good. I'm not going to drive Uber. So I went to plan B. And plan B was that my friend Tony told me that she could get me interviewed to be a part-time neighborhood compliance inspector, where I would drive around and help homeowners associations keep their property values up by, letting people know what they need to do, making, violating them or whatever, so that they could keep the property value up. So all of this is still going on in October, right? So I'm on plan B. Meanwhile, now I'm on plan B. So November, the engagement that was scheduled for Washington, D.C., the D.C. area in November, they switched from being in D.C. to being virtual. Get ready, Tasha, with Look at God, because as I facilitated that engagement, I thank God that it had switched. See, if that engagement had not switched from being in person to being virtual, I would have been strapped to absorb the expenses and then wait to get reimbursed, because I would have had to get to the airport, pay for parking, pay for my hotel. They take care of it. They take care of the flight, but you pay for your own hotel and then you get reimbursed, pay for my meals, come back, okay, and then drive home. So there's some expenses incurred that I would have had to wait to get it reimbursed. But once it was virtual, no expenses, just doing the engagement, okay, and getting my fee. Look at God. Got to repeat that from Tasha. Thank you, Tasha in Dallas, okay? So, but what I did is I started rebudgeting my life, including cutting off the expense of even having a website. Because you pay monthly with a website to promote your business. And I never really got any business from my website. It was a good place to send people for a reference check to check it out, but that's, that was an expense that I could cut. And that's what I started doing. I started looking at everything that I can cut. One thing I always say when people talk about, I want to get in the speaking business, I want to be an entrepreneur. I explain to them, I don't have a wife or a family or children. So see, it's not easy being an entrepreneur and with the money that the things that you have to go through. So there are times where I didn't eat, or I ate very little. And that's, I'm saying past time, and it's still some present day. But when I suffered, I didn't make anybody else suffer. So if you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, think about whose mouths you will and will not feed. That will play into your decision. Some people end up getting out of the entrepreneurial dream because they have to starve their family and they can't make it. I was able to stay in and yes, starve, but I'm like, hey, this is my passion. This is what I'm going to do. So all of that becomes a day. So that would be a yes, indeed. Even though Tasha put that up a little earlier, but look at God and yes, indeed. See, you have to recognize what you're going to be doing and then look at God's track record of everything he's been doing to get you there. That's what we sometimes lose track of with these cliches that we use, okay? So meanwhile, back to November, I found a replacement for my December engagement. So remember I told you the December engagement got canceled? Well, I ended up finding a replacement for that engagement. And then also in November, I drove to Ohio for Thanksgiving. But my heart was kind of heavy because I wasn't able to afford gifts for my 4 great nieces and nephews. But I still had a wonderful Thanksgiving. They were happy to see me. My family, they was happy. We had a ball. But you've had that feeling before, you want this Thanksgiving, and that was something that I had started to do with them last year. Is on Thanksgiving, I would go there, I would bring them their Christmas gifts. So I wasn't able to do that, and so that did kind of bother me. Okay, so that's when I decided. Oh, P.S. by the way, and then I learned that Plan B, compliance inspector, was no longer an option. They sold the company, and the new compliance inspection company, when I contacted them, they said, well, we're assessing our needs for 2025 and we'll get back to you. So plan A failed, plan B failed. I said, you know what? Time for me to go to plan C. And see, that's the other thing about being an entrepreneur. You know, you're going to have plan A, plan B, plan C. Well, even outside of being an entrepreneur, when I used to be a sales manager for Wall Street Journal in Chicago, I would say to my salespeople, okay, we on plan A. Oh, that didn't work. We on plan B. And then, we on plan J. And so it got to them saying, well, Sporty, what plan are we on today? And I said, we're on plan M, you know, because I would just go through the alphabet. When something didn't work, it was time to go to another plan. I didn't do a lot of stress, never have. It's not something I've just started doing as a motivational speaker. I just don't believe in having a whole lot of stress and negativity in my life. Move on. Something didn't work. What you going to do? So one of them said, well, Sporty, what you going to do when we run out of letters in the alphabet? I said, then we'll start numbering the letters. But I am never going to stop having the next plan. As far as I'm concerned, it's always 50-50. It's either going to work or it's not. And then you got to figure out how you're going to tweak it. But as I was saying plan C, as I heard myself say that to myself, I decided to spell it as plan C, because I could sit back and I wanted to sit back and see what God had in store for me. See, that's what I realized I wasn't doing. I was I'm plan A, here's what I'm going to do. Didn't work. Plan B, here's what I'm going to do. Didn't work. Plan C, let me see what God wants me to do. And see, we've already had some testimonies sprinkled in there along the way, right? Wisdom is in retrospect. Look back and see that your tests were being developed into testimonies. And then you can't erase them. You can't erase them and you can't negate them. So here's what happened. As I sat back to see what God had in store for me, well, my Chicago sister, Renee, had quadruple bypass surgery in October. And that's so the replacement, the December replacement engagement that I told you about, it was in Chicago, and I would be able to use any free time that I had that weekend to go visit her. And she was now home for rehab from October. Meanwhile, in December, I would also win a football pool. Well, why is that on there? Well, once I won the weekly pool payoff, I became able to erase that feeling that I had in Thanksgiving of not having gifts for my greats. I was able to erase that feeling and then buy them Christmas gifts and send it through Amazon. I'll give them a shout out because that was just something that was important to me. See, plan C. That's what God had in store for me. You see, the truth is that the truth is plan C. And plan C is that God likes to hear you planning and preparing. Then he finds the opening to give you the action that you will actually take. And one action I won't take is to erase what God has done for me each year. So I'm okay with your saying Happy New Year and making Happy New Year's resolutions. I don't. You see, I'm just literal in knowing that this will be another year because God has the plans for me. This will be another year that God has a year for me to celebrate on a daily basis. And that's why instead of Happy New Year, I celebrate Happy Next Year. Every year is my year because every day is my day. Don't we say it? This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. You just have to be literal sometimes. I'll see you next week, starting with this day, where we'll look at Truth Thursday, where tests are rarely understood until the testimonies heal. It takes your healing, it takes your going through your testimony for you to recognize and enjoy what God has done in your life. So continue to do that and continue to join me here on Truth Thursday. Sporty King. And hey, not so bad. I got it done in 30 minutes. All right. Cool. So that, like I said, this was my test. Thank you, Tasha, for joining me on this. And Anybody put your name in when you come and watch the video. Thank you for sharing. Have a great day. You do the same. Yeah. P.S. By the way, look back at your 2024 and look at the testimonies. Don't this is my year. Don't negate what you've already been through. And that's why I did on that test that meme. And I said, look, I'm planning to hit 70 this year. In August, I should be hitting 70, but I haven't hit it yet. So why would I say this is my year? Maybe this is my year not to make it to another birthday. I'm not being negative. I'm being realistic. And that's why I'm celebrating that I did make it to 69. I did make it to 68. I did make it to 67. Can't you go back, and let's not, again, not being totally negative, but can't you think about every year and age? Don't you know? I know somebody that died at every age that I've experienced. Just another way of looking at life. You got to find ways to enjoy life, y'all. So please continue to do that. If you can see on my door, you probably can't see it. My t-shirt back there says born in 19 and then the number 55. So, you know, I was able, that's my Spurs jersey where you could personalize it instead of just putting the number. People look at it as number 55. Who's that? No, it's not the number 55. It was born in. Let me show you that a little better. Born in 1955. All right. God bless y'all. Continue to enjoy who you are. And I'll see you next week here on Truth Thursday. Peace. Hey, look, I'm now actually on really live, but I'm going to just let that end the broadcast. I'm feeling a little better, but I would not have been able to talk that long with, and actually I'm kind of shocked that I'm talking this well right now, but y'all take care. And next week, I'm going to continue the time series where my focus, I put M, but the focus is going to be on the letter T. Remember, so give me words beginning with the letter T, and I will make you one of my co-authors next week. Thanks. God bless you. And tomorrow I'm going to be fine. And so I hope to see you on Gift Friday. Over and out. Ciao.